Hello everyone! Thanks for joining me in this video on making tofu from scratch. You won't believe how easy it is to take a cup of soybeans and turn it into a block of tofu. And you won't believe how delicious homemade tofu is, especially when you eat it fresh. All you need is 3 ingredients: soybeans, lemon juice, either fresh or reconstituted is fine, and water. Optionally, you can get a tofu mold or press. This one cost me about $7 on Amazon. It's optional, but it does help to mold the tofu into a rectangular shape, and it also helps to press out the excess water. You'll need some sort of cloth to strain out the liquid from the beans. Most people use cheesecloth or a nut bag or some other clean cloth. This press came with a straining cloth, which works very well for me. Okay, let's get started. I got these soybeans from Whole Foods. They are organic yellow soybeans and not expensive, around 87 cents a pound. For this recipe, I measured out 1 cup of dried soybeans, rinsed them very well, covered them with 3 cups of water, and then left them to soak overnight. The next morning, the beans were at least double or more their original size. I gave them a good rinsing and then on to the next step, turning the beans into soy milk. To make soy milk, you'll need to pulverize the beans with water. I use a ratio of 1 cup dried beans to 5 cups water. Remember, I measured out 1 cup of dried beans originally, although now the beans have expanded to almost around 3 cups, and in they go into my Vitamix. You can use a regular blender as well. The Vitamix is just quicker. This tradition of making tofu goes back a couple thousand years to the Far East, at a time in history when Vitamix blenders didn't exist, and yet they still made tofu. So use whatever you have to get the beans ground up, and if you have a blender or a Vitamix, the job is so much easier. It takes around 30 seconds in a Vitamix, maybe a little longer in another type of blender, but once the soybeans are pulverized along with the water, you'll need to strain out the pulp from the liquid. Some people use cheesecloth. If you do, make sure to double or triple the layers of cheesecloth. A nut bag works better since the holes are smaller, but you can use any type of clean cloth that will let you strain the liquid out. The mold I bought came with a piece of straining cloth. As you can see, it has a much tighter weave than the cheesecloth, so I use that instead of cheesecloth, and it works out very nicely. That was actually a pretty nice bargain, I think, $7 for both the mold and the straining cloth. Straining is fun, at least I think so. I put a colander on top of a pot, lined it with the straining cloth, and then poured about 1/3 of the liquid in. Then I gathered up the corners of the cloth to make a sort of pouch from it. And now here is the fun part. Squeeze! This leftover pulp is called okara. You can use it to make soy burgers or patties if you want. I poured another 1/3 of the soy mixture into the cloth, squeezed again, twisting the cloth and squeezing as much of the liquid as I could out of the pulp. And here we have some more okara. And then the last 1/3 of the soy mixture, squeeze some more, and I'm done. Now I have a pot of soy milk and some okara. There is a reason I'm using such a big pot for such a small amount of soy milk, and that's because in the next step I'm going to bring the mixture to a boil, and if you don't have a big enough pot, the soy milk will bubble up and boil over the top. So make sure to use a big pot. Here I have the pot of soy milk on my stovetop on a medium flame. Now you have to watch the pot very carefully. There's an old saying, a watched pot never boils, and I can tell you that's not true. It will boil. So watch it and stir to keep it from burning on the bottom. Eventually you will see some small bubbles, and that means the soy milk is starting to reach boiling temperature. Here is where you have to watch it really carefully. As the milk reaches a boil, it will rise up, and you can get it to go back down by giving it a stir. I let the milk boil for about a minute, maybe 2, and then I turn off the fire, and after a couple of minutes a skin will form on top of the milk. I skimmed this off. I haven't found a use for that yet. Now I'm going to add in the coagulant. I use reconstituted lemon juice, 2 tablespoons to a 1/2 cup of water. I pour in half the mixture, stirred for a bit, and then poured in the other half, stirred a bit more. You want to stir gently, but enough to make sure that the lemon juice is mixed in completely. And I could see that pieces of curd were starting to form. At this point, I stopped stirring and covered the pot. After about 15 minutes, the curds will have separated out from the liquid. If you uncover the pot and find you don't have curds, then you can add some more lemon juice, maybe another teaspoon, and stir it around until you see the curds forming. It sort of looks like watery cottage cheese at this point. Now it's time to separate the curds from the liquid. I do this by lining a colander with the same cloth I had used previously, and then pouring the pot of curds together with the liquid into the straining cloth. Now it's time to squeeze again, but this time more gently. I gather up the corners and you can see the liquid draining out is almost clear, like water, which it is mostly. At this point, most of the liquid has drained out, but there is still some more left, so it's going to need more time and pressure, which is where the tofu press comes in handy. You can use any sort of homemade mold, or a strainer, or a colander if you don't have a mold, but I do, so I placed the curds into the mold with the cloth, and then unfolded the cloth to reshape the curds to fit inside the mold better. Yes, I used my very clean hands, and then I refolded the cloth. Next, I put on the cover that comes with the press, and then I put some weight on it to help press out the water. This can of diced tomatoes comes in handy, and then I let it sit for 30 minutes to drain out the water. Now it's 30 minutes later and you can see more liquid has been pressed out. And I'm left with a nice looking block of tofu. Look at this beautiful block of tofu, and it's so delicious, fresh, and homemade. No comparison to store-bought tofu. The last step is to unwrap the tofu and place it into a container of very cold water. I know it sounds counterintuitive, especially since we just spent all this time draining out the water, but this step helps to firm up the tofu even more. The tofu will last about 1 or 2 weeks in the refrigerator, or you can freeze it for later use. This recipe produces a nice medium firm tofu. If you want it firmer, you can use more weight and let it sit longer. Experiment also with different coagulants. There are so many different variations on this recipe, so have fun with it. And once you're done, you have healthy, delicious tofu that you can pan fry, air fry, or drop naked on your salad, your choice. I hope you enjoyed this video on making tofu from scratch. It's really so easy, so give it a try. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed, please subscribe. I really appreciate it. Bye!